it more relevant for the challenges that we're heading into. And part of this is really recognizing that COVID is impacting each of us differently, and it's not impacting us to the same extent. We're all in really different situations right now. And for those who have capacity to show up to an event like this and to do this community work, to put your head up and ask these questions and seek out these conversations, we really have an obligation to keep in mind the folks who don't have the capacity right now. And that's something that we're holding as well. So if you've been thinking about getting involved, if you've been looking for something to get involved in, we really invite you to join us. We'll put out specific requests for help as they come up, but we also welcome you just to reach out for a conversation. If you have an idea for an event, if you'd like to get involved in any capacity, we're really open to that, and we're excited to be looking forward and doing this work together as a community. And thanks for coming. And I will turn things over to Kevin.
Thank you, Jenna. So you're all probably wondering who we are by now. So as Civic Tech organizers in 2021, we see ourselves as a group of optimistic, genuine, and civic tech lovers. We're looking to make a difference in the civic tech community, especially in BC. And to kickstart things, my name is Kevin. I see myself as a proud queer Vancouverite who also works for a mission-driven national non-for-profit called Code for Canada. If you never heard about us, Code for Canada help advancing digital transformation among government teams out there. And not only that, for many years, Code for Canada has been a key supporter to the civic tech ecosystem in Canada. And another fun fact, I also run another community group called Collab Collective. So that's it for me. And I would love to invite my teammates to share more about their background. Jenna, Gordon?
Yeah, so me again. I'm a product enthusiast and UX researcher, and also have a background in urban geography. So discovering civic tech was very exciting for me as a field that sort of brings those two together.
I'm Gordon. I'm one of the OG civic tech organizers from 2017, and currently an aspiring product manager. I can't believe we left this in about me liking puns, powder, and co-housing, but now you know. So that's my intro.
All right, thanks, team. So, and if you're interested to tackle civic challenges with us, we always have room for you. So come connect and chat with us after the event. So moving on, so if you missed the agenda for tonight, here's a quick overview on what's going to happen next. Soon we'll be inviting Jimmy Boyd, the Chief Digital Officer of BC, and the BC Public Service team, which includes Zachary Woodward and Michele Curran-Ricard, will share the stories on how BC innovates in government procurement. After that, there'll be a panel discussion among the vendor partners of the BC Digital Marketplace, and they'll share their experiences in responding to these new opportunities. There'll also be a Q&A session at the end, so better prepare yourself with some questions and use this opportunity to learn as much as you can. And by 8 p.m., we'll wrap up the show. And this is also a very important note for everyone. So as you know, this is a fully remote event. We want to remind the audience that Civic Tech Vancouver do not tolerate harassment in any form. So please be mindful and respectful of others as you would in an in-person event. We're dedicated to make today's event a safe space for everyone when we ask you to do the same. And thank you very much for that.
Okay, so yeah, I guess next we're going to hear from you, Jamie. So I'll spotlight you now, and I don't have an elaborate introduction for you, but I'm sure what you have to say will speak for itself. So for people who might not know, Jamie's the Chief Digital Officer with BC Public Service. And with that, I'll hand it over to you, Jamie.
Thanks so much for that intro and for having me, Gordon, and to all the organizers of Vancouver Civic Tech. It's awfully nice to be part of an event like this. It's been a little while since I went to a Civic Tech event, and I always find it refreshing and invigorating and a good kick in the butt to make sure that we're working on the right things within the public sector. So I wanted to share just a few thoughts before I hand it over to Zach and Michele and the folks who are, and Stephen, the folks who are doing the real work here in the BC Public Service. But just wanted to share a few reflections on procurement. Mostly because I know a lot of people, you start saying procurement and their eyes start glazing over and they think, oh boy, here we go. And I actually think it's one of the most interesting parts of digital change, and one of the most important levers that we have within government for really accelerating some of the priorities that we have around service delivery. Within the government of BC, so we're 35,000 public servants who serve the 5 million people of BC. We spend at least, $700 million or so a year that we know of on IT, and we outsource about 80% of that. So that's, several hundreds of millions of dollars that are going into hopefully a vibrant ecosystem. And when we're thoughtful about how we design those procurements, it can be really positive for the broader tech ecosystem. And when we're not, well, that's when we start running into problems. And so I really do think that having a strong procurement system that's based on the principles of competitiveness, openness, really is in our best interest. And that's not just for BC, it's for the public sector writ large. I was previously with the Government of Canada, and there we were spending more like $6 billion a year on IMIT. And that's a lot of jobs, a lot of Canadian jobs, a lot of Vancouver, BC based jobs, when we're thoughtful about how we design these things. And we can't possibly have all the talent or the skill sets that we need within the public sector. It just doesn't make sense for us to have all those skill sets in-house. So we're always going to be collaborating across sectors, and it just makes sense for us to try to hammer out strong procurement mechanisms. For me, the sort of, the one of the reasons I get so passionate about procurement is when I started my career as a federal public servant, one of the very, very early procurements that I worked on was for a massive technology procurement. It was in excess of $1 billion. And I remember going through the approvals, and we had to put it through as being a firm fixed price contract. This was many years ago. And I think the thinking at the time was that we could outsource risk. And I think that we've learned since then that governments can't actually ever outsource risk. You can't outsource the risk of, or outsource or share the imperative of having a vibrant democracy, of having a competitive procurement system. You can never actually get rid of all of that risk. And there's a growing body of literature that shows that taking sort of more iterative, more agile approaches, smaller procurements tend to generate more value. Right, and the Standish Group has collected lots of data on this. I know that some of our friends from Ottawa Civic Tech who are on the call tonight have done lots of research on this too within federal procurement. And so I contrast that within my own career, that early firm fixed price contract that was quite challenging to navigate, with another procurement that we ran not a couple of years ago. It was the first federal procurement that was explicitly open source, and we did a vendor dialogue, sat down with the vendors, and I remember one of the vendors saying, hey, why are you requiring us to submit our solution under the MIT license? And I sat there and I kind of looked at the other guy and I was like, oh, because we like MIT? He was like, you should probably be allowing us to submit it under Apache or any other compatible license. And we all kind of looked around the room and we were like, gosh darn it, he's right. And the lawyers all kind of trembled and they're like, uh-oh, you can't admit that you're wrong in front of a bunch of vendors. And I was like, well, we were. And so we admitted that we were wrong. And I think we ended up with a much better procurement coming out of that. So just generating that dialogue and of course, compliant with all of our trade obligations, but understanding that government is part of a broader ecosystem, and that when we work collaboratively across sectors, when we make it easy for there to be a competitive environment, that's in everybody's best interest. And so there are a few things that I think underpin our approach to digital change that are compatible with sort of modern procurement practices. We've laid them out in BC's digital principles. If you just Google BC's digital principles, you'll find them there. But a couple of things that stand out for me are the imperative to be open. I think everybody who's worked with us, so Sam, Drew, lots of folks who've worked with us have seen that we are very committed to open source. And I like to brag about this to our friends in Ottawa. If you go onto the Government of BC's GitHub, 980 repos. We do care a lot about open source, about open standards, about interoperability, that sort of thing. Increasingly we're investing in open data, and open APIs. We still have a lot of work to do, but just over 30 open APIs. So lots of momentum building there. We're also increasingly agile. And so, I think a lot of folks have sometimes pull their hair out when we beat the agile drum, but Gary certainly and many others on the call will know all about the value of using agile best practices in the public sector. We get better outcomes when we iterate, when we have the courage to release code early and often. And finally, we try at least to be user-centric. We have the fortune of living in this incredible jurisdiction that is massively diverse, but also has a digital divide, right? And so making sure that we are designing for and with the communities that we serve is certainly in everybody's best interest. So applying those principles of being open and agile and user-centric, applying those to the kinds of procurements that we're looking to do in the technology space, in the digital space, seems to generate better outcomes. And I'm absolutely honored to get to work with really bright colleagues like Steve and Zach, who are going to tell us a little bit more about the tools that are in play. But for me, in terms of BC delivering on the opportunity of being a modern government, serving the incredible people of BC, we need to be using modern tools, and to achieve the outcomes that we're targeting, we need to have effective partnerships, effective contracts and procurements, and really a vibrant ecosystem that supports that. So thank you very much, Gordon and Kevin and everybody, and Jenna for the invitation, for bringing this community together. And I hope that it's just the start of much more collaboration across sectors. Steve, did you want to dig in a little bit more on the marketplace, and then we'll hand it over to Zach?
Sure, that sounds great. Yeah, thanks, Jamie, for that introduction. For the people who don't know me, my name's Steve Chapman. I'm the product director for digital products and marketplace. I've been in government for about 3 years. When I first joined government, I joined this the same branch, the Exchange Lab, when we were gearing up the Sprint with Us procurement process. So my very first assignment was to be the Scrum Master on the project that got that underway. I was able to work with Zach and some other people on the call to get that procurement process in place. We were really excited to launch that back in April of 2018. A few months later, I left to go to a related business area called Data BC. But in the meantime, I got to watch the Sprint with Us program grow and mature. I know we went from that first procurement that we did back in April, looking at the statistics the other day and all of the applications that have come forward since. We're now up to 20 opportunities. As Jamie said, the value of those is close to $18 million now. So we're really excited that we've been able to scale it up and come up with a process that has grown across different business areas within government. And the thing that we always wanted to do was to create a marketplace. We had essentially two main groups in mind that we wanted to join together. We knew that there were a lot of business areas within government that wanted to do things differently, and were really interested in bringing in agile teams to work on their projects, because they thought that would be a good fit and would generate better outcomes than they had been getting. And we also knew that within the province that, as you all know, there's such a vibrant market on that side with the vendors. So many companies of all kinds of sizes. So what we wanted to do was create a marketplace that would allow everybody to compete openly and come up with a streamlined process. Zach, I apologize in advance if I'm stealing some of your thunder here, but a streamlined process that we were able to use that would be relatively inexpensive for both vendors and business areas, and would be able to generate procurements relatively quickly. And I think we've done a good job of achieving that. We always are trying to improve the process, of course, but I think we're pretty happy about the way that it has been able to scale, and we're looking forward to continue to move in that direction going forward. So again, I just came back. I just took this position about a month ago. So I'm back working with Zach again and looking for ways to how we can improve our process going forward. So Zach, maybe I can hand it over to you now.
Hi there, everyone. So my name is Zach Woodward. I'm the Senior Director of IMIT Procurement with the Central Purchasing Office within the BC government, so Procurement Services Branch. And my role in particular, about 4 years ago, I got tapped on the shoulder by two gents, Peter Watkins and Paul Roberts, who they came to me and said, we want to do some sort of procurement thing. We're not really sure what it is. We're not really sure where it's going. We're not really sure if it's going to work. Want to come help us? So that was really the best sell they had, and for some reason I signed up. This was, I had no idea what I was getting involved in at the time. I've been in procurement and supply chain for the better part of 20 years. And when they said, hey, let's go do this thing that's never been seen before, I went, yeah, sure. It's never been seen before, except for it's probably been done 1,000 times in other countries. This one, it really caught me off guard. It really was one that was able to kind of change the way that we were approaching things. And it brought a new lens to the way public sector procurement operates, the way we typically address procurement, and just what we can do to be supporting out these kinds of behaviors and operations across not just BC, but public sector as a whole. I know on this call here, we've got a few people from across the country and even internationally. And one of the key things that we really wanted to focus on here is that government's purpose is to provide services to citizens. That is what the purpose is. It doesn't matter what government you are, doesn't matter what country you're in, that is the purpose of government. Provide services to citizens. And so with all of us having that same mandate, it seems very easy and very straightforward for us to be able to go, hey, maybe we shouldn't be making these tools in isolation. Maybe we shouldn't be making these procurement models and going, this is the BC government's digital marketplace. We don't play well with others. And when they were talking to me about, like, we have this plan, we have this idea, and we've been engaging with our vendor community, we want to see where we can take this. And so I've created a little presentation here, and we'll go through the slides in a moment here. But what I want to do right off the bat is kick this off with a little bit of an understanding of where they first kind of got this initiative from and where the impetus from this came. And what happened was they were meeting with a number of different vendors across BC, and they heard three things on the regular. You cost too much, you take too long, and when we submit a proposal to you, we sometimes just don't even hear back. Inevitably, it means that we don't want to play with you anymore. We've got lots of business in the private sector. If government's going to make this difficult, then we don't want to play with government. Well, in the land of procurement, that's pretty damning. That's the kind of the feedback that you hear that you go, whoa, like when your vendors are saying that, you know that there's a problem. And now, don't get me wrong, procurement any day of the week is not exactly an easy thing to do. But when you have multiple vendors providing that same feedback and just going, we submitted a proposal and it goes into the void, and then 6 months later, we hear a generic, sorry, better luck next time. Or we hear a congratulations, and we don't even remember what we applied on anymore. Like, what do you do with that? What do you do with that idea of vendors saying, yeah, we found out we won. We didn't, great. What do you need us to do? Not a great start. So I'm going to kick over to the presentation here, but I just wanted to kind of set that foundation of this is where everything started. It started from that feedback from vendors who were going, this isn't worth it. We're busy elsewhere. It started from a few people, huddled in a room and just trying to see, like, what can we do to kind of shake things up, to change the way procurement operates, change the way government operates. So with that, I'm just going to pull up the presentation. So wish me luck.
Good luck.
All right. And I'm going to say this one. Haha. Are we winning? Everyone seeing digital procurement in the public service or public sector, sorry? All right, excellent. We're off to the races. So to start this off, I've got a little bit of a funny story that I generally go with. But I want to give you a quick history, and you saw this background for what's the background behind me, but this is where it kind of all started. This was the lab. We had the 1012 Douglas in Victoria here. The second and third floors, we kind of roped off, cordoned off, and made it into our little home. And back when I first joined here, there was effectively just 3 project teams working out of this space. There was the team that I was on working on this new procurement model. There was our OpenShift environment team. And then there was this team over in the corner doing some blockchain stuff that didn't make any sense to anyone but them. And so we just kind of left them alone and let them do their thing. But at that time, it was really just an unknown entity. We were just, crammed into a little room and trying to figure out, like, what are we doing and what are we trying to accomplish here? How can we change things? There wasn't a lot of government knowledge or presentation or marketing or funding or any of that stuff. It was really just a grassroots movement trying to get started. But I can tell you, there's a lot of fond memories that I have of this place working till, I'm not going to say what time in the morning, trying to crack the code on, like, how can we do this differently? And, Steve and I have joked many times, and he's had to explain to his wife that, no, I know my phone's exploding at 11 o'clock at night, but it's all just Zach. He's just firing me off Jira tickets because he's just, what if we did this? And what if we did that? And making all of these random suggestions and changes as we were going through this process. So I want to take you for a quick moment through a walk of government procurement. And for some of you, you may not have been through this process before. It might be something that's kind of new to you. I know for a lot of people, the term procurement meant nothing except until a couple of years, well, basically last year, when we first started to hear procurement in the news on a regular basis in regards to COVID response. So what does procurement in government actually look like? Well, your boss comes to you and says, we need a thing. And so you need to start doing your business case. Okay, I need to write a business case that explains, we need this thing, it's going to solve this problem, and you're working away, and it's going to take you a couple of weeks or maybe a few months to generate this 100-page, well-researched out business case that says, this is what we need. Then you submit your business case and it goes up the chain for approval. It takes about a year. Then comes back and, okay, your business case has been approved. All right, so now it's time to start that funding request. So you start doing the funding request and explaining how much it's going to need for salaries and the funding dollars for the actual thing you need to buy and how long it's going to last and the contracting dollars and the lawyers and all of those facets. And then you need to beg, plead, borrow, and steal for resources and things like that you need to finally get your financial submission approved. That can take half a year, maybe a year, depending on the complexities of the project. Then you get to start your procurement. Excellent, you're on your way. Except for it depends on how complex this is. Your procurement can be anywhere from a few weeks all the way up to a few years, depending on the complexity and scope of the project you're working on. So then you need to do your requirements gathering for the procurement, and then you need to engage with your stakeholders, and you need to post your opportunity, make sure that it's out there for the community to see so that the vendors can then respond. And then you have to evaluate those responses, and then you need to get your contract in alignment and have the vendor sign it and have your leadership sign it and get all of that supported out. Well, by this point, you could very easily be on like year 3 or 4 or whichever that may be from when you first had your boss tell you, we need a thing. So then we finally get to the opportunity was posted, it closed, you signed your contract, and if everything goes well, hey, you're off to the races. You've got a signed contract, you've got the thing now. And that's when you realize that the business requirements from 4 or 5 years ago have changed. The needs of citizens have changed. But you're now contractually obligated to buy the thing that your business case and your funding request and all of those things called for. Now, this isn't specific to BC. This is government everywhere. And I've worked in governments in South America, in Europe, and across Canada. And this is not a BC issue. This is a government issue where we create these processes for the procurements that end up making it so that by the time we get out to market, by the time we're responding to the needs of citizens, we're more often than not, especially in a digital environment, we are going out for a tool that either is no longer applicable, potentially doesn't even exist anymore. Maybe it's been retired because there's been 4 or 5 iterations of tools since then, or it you get it and then you realize, oh, that actually wasn't the issues that we needed. That wasn't the tool that we needed. It solves for a different problem, and we actually needed version B, not version A. So this is the complexities that come with it, and what really drives a challenging behavior when it comes to the procurement needs within a government organization to support out a rapid response and a digitally innovative technique of working with our citizens, working with our vendors to be able to support out all of those needs. So with that, we started to work with our team, and we wanted to decide what was going to be the key things that we're going to be able to support out our demands and our needs across the public sector. And for us, when it comes to these sort of digital tools, we needed to focus on open source. That was a given. We needed to make sure that we were going to stamp this with a Creative Commons or Apache 2 license. And that way we could just take the code and use it as we saw fit. We weren't going to be stuck with weird customization requirements or weird legal restraints on the products that we had, and also so that we could start to create an environment of sharing across other public sectors and other jurisdictions. We wanted to focus on agile. And I want to just take a moment here and stipulate that waterfall isn't bad. By no means am I throwing the baby out with the bathwater. Waterfall is an excellent approach, and it has its purposes. It has its right approaches. The problem is when you use waterfall for everything. So we wanted to create an opportunity for people to use agile as well, something so that they actually had options. It didn't always have to be waterfall. It could be agile, and they could work in those Scrum ceremonies and those kinds of processes that allowed for them to do quicker iterations of digital development rather than those larger long-scale developments that we so typically see. And it also required that we started to focus on modern digital practices. One of the key things that I saw when I first joined my team here was I was working on a project called the West Procurement. And the last time the West Procurement had been run was 15 years prior. So that means that when that contract was signed, Google was still, it was starting to be a household name, but Gmail didn't exist yet. Smartphones didn't exist yet. Like all of those things that are just a standard of a staple of our day-to-day lives now, were still unknowns. So to think about deals like that operate, where you have these 10, 15-year deals, it creates this structure and this complexity that is hard for us to break out from. And so we wanted to focus on using modern digital practices where we were going to work in iterative stages, work in only 1 or 2 year iterations, rather than these 5, 10, 15-year iterations where you inevitably would have to look back at the original contract and go, what were we thinking? Wi-Fi was just around the corner. We had no idea. So we really wanted to focus on bringing those kinds of guiding principles to all of our documentation, to all of the way we would work within this space, and so that we could more accurately engage with our vendor community. They wanted to work with us. They wanted to be able to be fast and nimble. They wanted to work with modern tech, and we would come out to them and say, hey, yeah, how about Visual Basic? If you could do that, that'd be great. Has anybody used Microsoft Access? No, all of that out the window. Those things are fine. They're all good. We can use them in times and in certain places, but we wanted to really focus on what does it mean for us to start bringing in React? What did it mean for us to start bringing in, really up to speed Python and C++ and start bringing the really sharp coders that are out there that can go, you know what? I'm going to work with a team and really start to chew on this gnarly problem that you have and bring new techniques and new capabilities to the fore to be able to support out our needs across the province. But this came with kind of the other side of the coin, because on one hand, this made the vendors go, yeah, like we want to get engaged in this. This is exciting. This is opportunity for us to change the conversation with government. The other side of the coin, though, is unfortunately our need to change the conversation with government. We needed to restructure the way that they were going to be supporting out their engagement in procurement. No longer could they just go, hey, yeah, here's your project. We're going to just give it to you and come back to us in a couple of years when it's done. We needed them now to go, you know what? We're going to commit a product owner. We're going to potentially commit like a technical architect. We're going to dedicate resources to this, to be working with your team. We're not just going to toss the grenade into your lap and say, okay, here's our problem, fix it. We're going to eat, sleep, breathe, drink the whole deal with your team and work through this problem together. And so we wanted to create a framework on both sides of the conversation, something that made it easier for the vendor community to engage with government, but something that created more accountability for government when engaging on these types of projects. We needed to make it so that they knew the problem, they lived the problem, and that they were going to be dedicated to owning the solution. This created a lot of opportunities for us to be able to be engaged in this space, to be able to be supporting out the work that was happening here. And I want to give a quick nod to Michele because I stole some of her slides that she gave me the other day. They were great, so I tossed them in here as well, but just a quick nod to her so she doesn't yell at me later. So once we started to do that, we wanted to focus on what could we do with our community and working with both sides of the conversation. What was going to be the tools that we were building? And we created one tool called Code With Us and one tool called Sprint With Us. Now, Code With Us was a very simple tool. Generally, we're talking a 2-page procurement where you didn't have to send to us this massive binder of all of the explanations of how you were going to do all of this work and all of your experience and your company's history and your sales numbers. No, just more often than not, it's send us your resume and maybe a link to your GitHub repo so that we can see the kind of stuff that you've done in the past. With Sprint With Us, we wanted to bring it up to a different level where we want to bring on a team. We know that there's problems in government that we've been trying to solve for days, weeks, months, years. We want to bring on a team that's going to, chew the fat on that problem and work with us, regardless of how gnarly it is, to start working through the process, to start figuring out a way that we can resolve that. And so we wanted to create kind of a framework that would use in this space to be able to support out those needs. In particular, it wanted to be an agile procurement process. It's not a common thing to see in government. And when we look across on a global scale, this is still something that is fairly new. I know that agile has been around for 30 some odd years, but it's not new. It's not something that's been really grabbed onto by the procurement and legal and government processes that are out there. We realized that one of the key things that we needed to do as well is we wanted to make sure that it was restrained. We didn't want to allow these to balloon into being 10, 20, $30 million deals, because when that happens, we tend to lose sight. We tend to lose those controls to make sure that we are engaged on this project, that we are supporting out the work that's happening here. So we wanted to cap it at $2 million and allow for us to just be constantly iterating and constantly focused on how are we moving this ball down the field, or how are we continuing the journey of this project. We wanted to shorten the time that we had with vendors for them to be able to engage. And going back to what I said at the very beginning, those 3 things that we were hearing from vendors, we really wanted to focus on what could we do to reduce that engagement. Now, we decided to do kind of a 3-phase procurement where we did team questions and then a code challenge and then a team scenario, with the intent of it phasing out teams as we move through the process, resulting in reduced costs for those vendors that weren't going to be shortlisted. I have received feedback over the past that for those vendors that don't get shortlisted, this is actually increased costs in a number of procurements. And so, in some ways it has worked, in some ways it hasn't. And the important thing is that we need to always be, evolving and changing this process as we move forward. But the intent is for us to be able to make sure that we're engaging with our vendor community quicker, so that we were dedicating resources, so that we would make sure that we were working in that agile environment, and that the vendors knew how they were to be engaging with us, how we were going to be working with them. There wasn't going to be this massive structure of governance and decision making. It needed to be that we had dedicated resources supporting out the work that was happening. And that was so critical to us. But then we found this is where really the pushback came in, and things that we needed to start addressing on our side. Because, and I know I'm not going to speak specifically to any particular procurement or any particular branch or ministry, but we found that a lot of people in government didn't understand what this meant. They didn't understand what this looked like. And so the automatic knee-jerk reaction was to, yeah, we want to do this, but we don't want to change. We want to do this, but we want to stay the same for all the processes that we already have in place. And so we had to start addressing those things as well and talking about what does it mean for us to be able to support out things like maintenance for these services, because we didn't want to create that structure of you have to, you're building and then what? Well, what do you mean and then what? Well, we needed to make sure that we created a relationship with our vendors, that we created a relationship within the ministries to be supporting these tools and making sure that they had a home to be safe and protected, and all of those things that have to happen with digital tools in these days. You can't just build it and then let it go. We needed to make sure that it was a good fit with the product owners, that the business areas understood what it was that they were getting engaged in and what it was that they were trying to accomplish. And we needed to make sure that it was going to be something that was going to be able to work within our current environments and our current frameworks. As I mentioned, we were setting up an OpenShift environment for a government cloud, but there was so many other tools and things that we need to be understanding of when it comes to things like, for example, our freedom of information, our privacy and protection, our security requirements in the province. There's a lot of information that we have to consider there. And we need to make sure that we are being responsible on our side when we are engaging all of the vendors when it comes to this digital innovation and these types of procurement processes. And inevitably, we had to do a lot of communication and marketing and change management to get these business areas to start to realize that this wasn't just another procurement where you just send it out to the community and make it their problem. This is something that we had to own together. So with that, I kind of wanted to do one quick little flush through the process of what we developed here. And what ended up happening is, we have a government agency come to us and say, you know what, we want to do a sprint with us. We want to do an agile procurement. So they'll need to submit to us, this is what we're trying to do. We need some help to make sure that this is going to align with the purposes of digital innovation, of digital development, and of agile procurement. And we would go through the process here on PSB or Procurement Services branch's side, and we'd review it, go, okay, yeah, you know what, here's our rubber stamp, let's go forward. You've clearly got the right mindset, the right plans for how you're going to be addressing this. And then we would go through it and post to the public. We would get feedback from the vendors. We'd have them submit their proposals. And then we bring in our evaluation team to start going through these processes. The first one would be the team questions, where we would just ask a few questions to kind of get a feel for who the teams are, or what the skill sets are, what's their experience. And we really wanted to change the way this model worked, where we went, it's going to be blind. The evaluators get to have no idea who submitted these responses. So they're not allowed to say their name, the company name, their staff names, or any proprietary project or software. And the reason why we did that is so that it was now a level playing field. The evaluators had no idea who responded, so they couldn't go into the evaluation with any sort of company bias. Oh, I've worked with that company in the past, they were really good or really bad. They just had to look at it and go, well, is it a good response? We could then evaluate on that, move along into the process, and then notify the vendors, which then allowed for them, those that have been shortlisted, to go into the code challenge and demonstrate to us how their team would create a small little app. I've seen ones as interesting as create a crossword where it'll have this kind of a combination and these puzzlings in it, all the way down to, we want to have a little library app where you can submit books and take them out and do things of that nature. Are those necessarily relevant to the work that was being done? Not necessarily, but what it did was allow for us to see, well, how do you create an app? How do you do testing? How do you document your code? Things of that nature, so that we could see in a live environment how this team would work on our project, how they would work together to support this. And then we would move on to a team scenario where we would work with all of the people that are supporting us out there to understand what's being engaged on, how can we support them, and what are the needs in this space. And we could then give them a quick little scenario where they would actually have to, do a live demonstration of how they would work with us. And sometimes it would be like the day one submission, or it could be something along those lines where we get to learn how would they be working with our team to solve this problem. Quick little side note, one of my favorite ones in particular was a team scenario that I ran, where in the middle of the scenario, I killed myself off. Oh no, Zach got a new job, or Zach got hit by a bus. And now you have a brand new product owner that doesn't know anything. Keep going. And you could see that's like, oh, that's no problem. That's easy. And then they'd ask the new product owner a question and just, I don't know. And you could see how the teams would have to, evolve and change and transform when in live time, when they realized, oh no, we need to now adapt to a new circumstance within this project. It was really an incredible experience. And as we moved through that, we could then revolve the team scenario and go to our contract award. When we first did this back in, I want to say it was June of 2018, when we actually finalized our first process. And it was notified as the 17-day procurement. And it was really an exciting time for us. We were all on pins and needles to see how was this going to work and what was going to be the engagement. And we were thrilled when we saw that there was huge appetite from the community. We had, I believe it was 14 vendors that applied to that opportunity. And it was the first one. We were shocked. We were floored by that. Since then, we've only been able to improve upon that. And we've even had it down to a 6-day procurement at one point, where we were going fast, but it was amazing to see how we could work with the vendors and be so structured and supportive in this space. Now, with this, I want to note that this is not the perfect procurement. There is so much learnings that we've had over the years in this space, and there's been so much opportunity for us to iterate and create documentation to evolve and understand what can we do next. This in my mind, it's still very much an alpha. It's a pilot. We've created it, and we're still just in those early days. We've run 20 procurements through the Sprint With Us process. And while that may seem like a good number, and you're right, we're getting up to a healthy stance here where we can say, yeah, we know we've got enough feedback here to be able to start to evolve and generate it into the beta or whichever version is, the 2.0 version. It's important for us to recognize that it's from engagement from our community. It's from engagement from the vendors, from our ministry clients, with them providing us this feedback of going, we really like this, we don't really like that, the cost structure here, the pain points there. Inevitably, it's so important for us to get that feedback so that we can know what we want to be doing next and how can we be changing this. And I do want to put that bug in the ear of everyone on this call, that if you've been involved in this process, if you've seen this live, or if perhaps you've bid on an opportunity, that we are always looking for that feedback, because there's always opportunity for us to change, for us to make this better. But we can only do that with your involvement. Go back 4 years. The only reason why this exists is because of involvement from vendors who went, it costs too much, it takes too long, it's going into the void of government, and we don't know what's going on. We got that feedback, and this is what came out of it. Now we've got this, and we need that feedback from all of you to be able to know, what can we do next? It's been an incredible experience for me up to this point. Not to say that it's not going to continue to be an excellent opportunity, but I really have that call to action where I want to be able to engage with everyone to know, not only what is it we can do for BC government, but what can we do for the Yukon, for Quebec, for the federal government, for down in the States. I know there's somebody on the call here. So what can we be doing to make this tool a public sector tool, not just a BC government tool? So everything you touch at the end of the day is procurement. Everything had to go through supply chain. It had to be purchased. There had to be contracts. Inevitably, if you bought a pair of pants, You had to go to the store, you had to make your selection. Maybe there was multiple pants there. You had to decide what it was that was going to meet your requirements. I tell this story at a fair few opportunities because I had a girlfriend a few years ago who decided to buy me a pair of pants because she saw them on a rack. They were on sale. They were nice, and they were dress pants, the whole deal. I couldn't fit them over my knees. They were clearly meant for somebody who was probably 100 pounds lighter than I am, but they were great pants and they were on sale. Inevitably, it's about right fit. It's about meeting the needs. It's about meeting the requirements of the service that you're trying to provide for. At the end of the day, yeah, she got me a great pair of pants. And if I was somebody half my size, they would have been fantastic. But for myself, simply didn't meet my needs. And we need to be making sure that we're working with both our vendors and working with our ministry clients to make sure that we're bringing both of them to the table, so that we're engaging both of them to understand, well, what's the waist size? What material? Are these going to be dress pants or jeans or baggy pants or flared pants or leggings? Or there's so many options here. And taking this analogy over to the digital space, everyone on this call knows how complex it can get. Do we need to have it, in open source? Does it need to be something that we're going to put into the GitHub repos? Does it have to be something that's hosted on Microsoft Dynamics? Is it an Amazon issue? Is it machine learning? Does it go with Azure? There's so much complexity out there these days that we need to have that engagement from the experts, from the people that really know the tech that's out there to help us make better purchasing decisions, to make better development decisions. And that's really what we were driving at here, is to make sure that we can engage with the experts in the vendor community, to engage with that marketplace and go, this is what we're trying to accomplish. How can you help us get there? How can you help us solve these critical, gnarly problems? So, in summary here, Sprint with Us was designed to be this accelerated procurement process because we saw that traditional procurement simply wasn't meeting the needs of our clients. It simply wasn't meeting the needs of citizens. We heard from the vendors that this wasn't not working, and we needed a new way to go forward. We wanted to have that extremely quick turnaround to be able to support out in that contract award, be able to engage, and like it was, we found a way to do the 17-day procurement. But that was just the alpha iteration. And we're constantly working, and Steve and I have been in conversations for years now about what can we do next? How can we be changing this? And this is something that is so near and dear to our hearts when it comes to being able to transform these processes. I know that I'm speaking specifically from procurement now, but there's so much opportunity across government with all of the different works with the different ministries and the different demands that citizens have. It's incredible the amount of low-hanging fruit that is out there. And in the end, we need to make sure that it's a win-win for both sides. We need to spend so much time working with our ministry clients to engage them so that they're willing to work with the vendors. They're willing to work in this digital environment. I really need to stress that to everyone here, that it's about both sides coming to the table and both sides working together, rather than us just going, thanks, this has been great, it's your problem now, please solve it for us. We need to make sure that we're committed to working on this with you and engaging on this with you. So with that is the end of my presentation. I think that the next person on deck we have is Michele Ricard, who has been working with a number of the teams to be able to support out the Sprint with Us process. And she's going to be coming on here for a moment just to speak about her experience and engagement in running some of these opportunities and getting to see what it's like to engage with both our vendor and our ministry clients. So with that, I'll hand it over to Michele.
Great, thanks, Zach. Really appreciate it. So I don't have a lot to add, but I can say that I've had just the most amazing experience doing this Sprint with Us, because I do work in procurement services and I am used to the normal procurements that can take forever, where here it's such an accelerated pace that we do things in. The teams that are involved, the clients that we have, they have to understand that everything is done very quickly. We don't cut corners in the sense of when we do our evaluations, we're very careful with our evaluations and we document them. But at the same time, it's a very, very tight timeline. So when I started, I actually sort of did more observing. And as I got to learn more, I became a facilitator and a guide. And I work with the client and I help them go through the process. And what I really enjoyed about it is that, as Zach was saying before, like there are 3 phases. There's the opportunity, which is posted to the digital marketplace. There are the challenges, and then there's the contract award. And the first one and the third is sort of self-explanatory, but where I really enjoy myself is in the challenges. And the first one is the team questions. So my client gets together with their team members and they do the evaluation. They provide me with this information, and then I put the scores into the digital marketplace. And I also liaise with the vendors, so I can let vendors know who's going forward and then who didn't make it. But we also provide debriefs. And I can say that in a lot of cases that people that didn't make through, our client teams really want to help them out. So when it comes to the debriefings, they really work to make it something that vendors can go forward and do much, much better in the next Sprint with Us opportunity. The second one is the code challenge, and I know that Zach had alluded to that, and it's great to watch too, to watch the coders go to work, and we sit there and we evaluate their work, and they do tremendous things, and I have to say, very, very creative. And then finally, this is my favorite, it's the team scenario, and to me, it's a combination of Survivor and Big Brother. And the reason why I say that is because we, the client, and myself as a facilitator, we watch the vendor teams go together and work to solve a problem. And why it's Survivor is because they're really moving. They're in each of the different challenges. They go from one to the next, so they can get that immunity and they can move on and hopefully finally win the award. So it's really terrific to watch them. And what I really like too is that it allows the vendor and the client to see, hey, can we work together? And how do they do things? So I think it's just this wonderful sort of eyes. You can see everything that's going on at one time and sort of make some decisions there as well. So I think it's a win-win for both the vendor and for the client, because we get to see the vendor's creativity, their capabilities, their collaboration, and their knowledge, their incredible knowledge. And we get it at such a quick pace, and we can start solving problems really quickly. So that's it from me.
Wow, thanks, Michele. All right, all of a sudden. So I'm going to reset the room for a moment here. So we are about to have our discussion panel with our 4 vendor partners. So I'm just going to spotlight them now and kind of set up the room for that. So anybody who's in a gallery view, you're not going to see the spotlights that I'm trying to set up now for these vendors. So if you go to speaker view, you'll be able to see all the vendors that I'm about to bring up. I'm just trying to find them within this view here. So give me a sec, because I really am not good at multitasking. I'll prove it again tonight. The other part is that we had our timeline in the meetup event, and with a topic like this, it's clear that it's pretty hard to maintain that. If I could just get all the panelists I'm trying to bring up to activate their video, it'll make it easier to find you. But let's roll with this. This is a semi-structured event, as you can see. So we do want to make sure there's time for questions, but we also don't want to shortchange the vendors on some key questions that we want them to help us answer tonight as well. So let's just play it by ear and see what happens here. Kevin, did you want to say something before we jump in, or are we okay? I see a thumbs up. Okay, so we've shared questions with the vendors in advance. And so I'm just going to go through each one of those, and we'll probably do like a popcorn style Rachel, maybe that was kind of your suggestion, but basically not every vendor is going to speak for an equal amount of time about every question. What this is really about is everybody came tonight. We want to get like maximum value and insights out of all these questions and answers. So we're going to do this in a popcorn way to make sure that any gems that come out once, you know, all the partners have a chance to just say, no, that's pretty much all the context that I would add too. So as far as the order, just to kick us off, Drew, I'm just going to start with you answering the first one, and then we'll just sort of go from there. But can you speak to what were some of the biggest pain points that you as a vendor have with procurement in general?
Yeah, thanks, Gordon. I think that's a great question. You know, I think Zach and Michele have done a really good job providing context of what procurement in BC has been like and why Sprint with Us was introduced. From the vendor's perspective, I like to look at it from the perspective of a small business, you know, and increased competition is a good thing for everyone involved. The existing procurement processes before Sprint with Us and Code with Us were very admin heavy for both government and vendors. So for government, it takes several years to go to market, but for a vendor, you know, you need dedicated personnel and staff to be able to write proposals and RFPs to submit them to government opportunities. With Sprint with Us, it was more about eliminating that administrative burden, because having that much work to do just to apply eliminates a lot of small and owner-operated businesses. I know that a lot of the businesses that do win opportunities now in the digital marketplace started as very small teams, and it's because it's more of a level playing field. So I think that's probably the largest challenge with procurement in general with government. And it's just good to see steps being taken in the right direction.
Yeah, I like that. And I'm gonna interrupt myself here. I really didn't introduce the vendors, the vendor partners at all, because we're a little short on time, but I can imagine how awkward it would be to just jump into a panel discussion with literally zero introduction. So let me just say a little bit about who everybody is. I know you're all super famous, but I'll save you the trouble and do a little bit anyway. You've been designing and building software for over 15 years now, Drew, and you've worked with organizations like BC and Yukon governments, Change.org, Apple, and your team at Real Folk is known for building transformative procurement software, including the digital marketplace and procurement concierge. I'll just go through other brief intros here because I missed that in the hubbub. Christopher Robinson, AKA Chris, thanks for joining us. Love your background. Chris, you're a senior technical architect with AOT Technologies based in Victoria, originally from Sydney, been here 2 years. Hopefully you'll stick around. AOT provides consulting and implementation software services to both government and non-government in mostly BC, but some US and national. Chris has been involved in 2 winning Sprint with Us initiatives. The BC Services Card project last year, and a 6-month engagement to build a web app and framework to help public sector organizations with their BC Services Card integration projects. It says you've reduced the time taken to integrate from weeks to minutes. My goodness. And you're a Scrum Master and Solution Architect. Rachel from Button.io, Google that. Rachel, you've been working in government consulting on technology, policy, and procurement for over 15 years in both US and Canada. You're the VP of Finance and Operations for Button Inc., which helps governments build reliable digital services, including the BC Greenhouse Gas Industrial Reporting and Control Project through Sprint with Us. Pretty fancy, had a chance to take a look at it a little bit. Rachel, you've also worked on BC government projects as a user researcher, certified Scrum Master, and project manager. And last but not least, there is no last here. Sam, you're the CEO and co-founder of Freshworks Studio, which is one of Canada's fastest growing companies and specializes in designing and developing elegant and highly functional mobile and web apps. Your team is 80 plus and growing based out of Victoria. You work with startups, enterprises, and public sector across North America to create remarkable digital experiences. You've also won the award tonight for Best Background. In May 2018, Freshworks was the first company to be awarded a contract using Sprint with Us, a fellow OG. Freshworks Studios hired over 15 people in 2021 and has over 13 new job openings to keep up with their growth from last year. Thank you for letting me take that airtime. I'll only have questions now. So thanks for your response to this question about challenges in procurement, Drew. Let me get us back on track. Who wants to add to challenges that you've had with procurement in general next?
Well, I don't mind just throwing my 2 cents in. So I've been involved in a lot of procurements over many years, and most of them have been the traditional ones. And the truth is that it's a very different kind of person who writes good responses to RFPs than it is who does good Sprint with Us responses, right? A response to an RFP doesn't actually tell you anything about the team that's going to be working on that particular engagement. It tells you quite a lot about the experience of the person who's written the RFPs. So for me, writing RFPs was one of the worst things in the whole world. I hated doing them. I hated writing those responses. The Sprint with Us way of doing things was far closer to the team and far more pleasurable to be involved with for all involved.
Okay, 2 more opportunities. Shall we pass? Going once? Okay. Oh, Rachel?
No, I agree with everything that's been said. I think, you know, if I had to add one thing, it's that the government sales cycle, as Zach alluded to, can be quite long. And it becomes even more challenging when you talk about procuring for tools versus procuring for solutions. And one thing that Sprint with Us does well in projects that have the full 3 phases of the project, starting with an inception phase where you start talking about the approach to the problem and how to deliver the maximum business value and citizen impact, is that you get an opportunity to talk about approach and not just talk about a more traditional procurement process that might just say, we need a software tool from X, which is being prescriptive instead of giving a chance to work with the government in partnership and come up with the right solution.
Thanks for that. Sam, it's on to you or the next question.
I think everything has been covered. So next question it is.
Okay, so Rachel, you alluded to a pro, but let's go right into pros now. What did you find surprising, or what went particularly well with the Sprint with Us experience? Maybe I'll start with you, Sam, since we haven't heard from you yet.
Yeah, sounds good. I think first of all, I think great work in organizing this Civic Tech, and as well as incredible amount of hard work has gone from Zachary and Dhruv in standing up a digital marketplace. So I want to acknowledge that. And I also want to congratulate Chris from AOT. They won the recent Sprint with Us, a $2 million opportunity. So good on you, Chris and AOT team. That was fantastic.
Thanks.
So in terms of pros, if I were to go into the memory lane and what Zachary was going through the journey, I was part of his journey when he was reaching out to the vendor partner community and doing some interviews, and he actually reached out to us. And at that point of time, our company was probably around 30 employees or so, and we were in the growth phase. And he spoke to us in a language that we were surprised to hear from the government, which is, hey, we want to move fast, we want to break things, and we want to modernize procurement. And we were taken aback, and we're like, maybe this is just a routine government thing that they're going to talk big things and not going to do anything. But to our surprise, they started making progress on that, and very soon that became a reality. And then the first Sprint with Us dropped. And then we started to think, hey, like we should totally apply. We know about this. We knew this was coming, and I think our team is prepared for that. And luckily, and with hard work, our team won the first Sprint with Us, and that really allowed us to grow our company and hire more people. So when it comes to the pros of that, it was a $1.5 million opportunity. Prior to Sprint with us, we would have never imagined to apply or bid on this opportunity on our own. We would just pass on that opportunity because we were like, maybe it's just too big for us, or it's just going to require too much writing effort. But the fact that it has the sense that it creates a level playing field, and to what Zachary said earlier, that the people who are going to review the responses, they're not going to see whether it is coming from a small company or a large company, removes that bias. And with that removal of bias, I think that's the biggest factor for any company, any size, to go through and make it into the top 4. And that, I think, is the biggest pro, is creating that level playing field. And a second close one is the fast, like how fast it is. So from the start and to finish, I think within a month, we got that first contract and we were just blown away. We still thought that wasn't happening. So hopefully that answers the pro question. But there are so many more pros.
I'm sure someone can add to that.
So I'm going to throw in one because I think that we're all probably going to say pretty much the same things, because if you look at all of the vendors here, right, everybody's pretty small. We're all the small guys, so this is all good for all of us, right? We don't really have the big end of town here, which is kind of surprising. I'm surprised that they didn't want to show up. Maybe you excluded them, not sure. But one of the things that I will say that this is surprisingly doing is I actually think it's promoting cooperation between vendors as well. So I know that from working in the lab, I know that just next door there's a team and there's Freshworks guys in the team, and I know that Buttons are somewhere else. And the fact is that the guys talk, the guys speak to each other, and we know that we actually could very likely be working on a project together at some stage. So I think that the atmosphere and the environment, it's partly the sprint with us, but it's also partly the lab, and it's partly the agile thing. And frankly, I think it's where the government's going as well. I think that we're providing teams who can work together. So a big part of the whole sprint with us is working together, and that means working together with other vendors as well. Right, so I think it's way less exclusionary than it has been than the traditional approach. I just thought I'd throw that one out before I forgot it.
Like that. Thank you. Any other key gems that haven't been articulated about major pros of this process?
I would love to add that in addition to, I think what Sam and Chris have said is very valuable and spot on. I'd love to add that it's an extremely meritocratic process, and procurement traditionally is very speculative. When you're hiring someone to do something that your team can't do, it's because you don't have the skills and the insight to be able to do it. Whereas with Sprint with us, Chris had earlier mentioned about how it's much closer to how a team actually operates in tech. It's because of that it's so much more meritocratic, and it leads to two things. One is that the actual procurement is much more flexible for government. Because it's agile during the implementation phase, there are regular check-ins through sprint meetings to be able to make sure the project is on track, which then reduces the risk of failure for these projects. So not only is it benefiting vendors by being meritocratic and making sure opportunities spread more evenly in the ecosystem, it actually results in better value for government buyers.
I think another added value is, it's really important to be able to iterate on these processes. And I'd love to thank the whole government team that's present for being willing to give us debriefs and receive feedback and have a backlog that's iterated on as part of the Sprint with Us process. Because one of the harder things about many procurement vehicles is they were enacted legally somehow, probably a long time ago. And they don't change. They're relatively inflexible. And so, even when things do go wrong, and Button itself is a blameless culture where failure is okay. And when you do agile, it's great because you do a retro every sprint. So you have time to react and to change and to iterate on what you're doing. And I think the fact that Sprint with Us in general embodies that is something that you see starting across governments, across provinces and in the States. That's super important, not just for small business, but in general for tech projects where it's unrealistic to think that you're going to procure something now on a 10-year contract that's going to be the same thing in 10 years from now. And it increases the speed of innovation. And I think the dialogue around that innovation a lot more, and it makes it a lot more accessible.
Kevin, I'm seeing you kind of like smiling here. I think you're amused by some of these timelines that Rachel's maybe brought up. Thanks for that. I want to try something. I'm thinking of the audience of which we're all a part. I'm wondering if we could shake it up a little bit. I wonder if we could take even like 10 minutes for two of the most like burning questions that the audience has, and then try to put us back on the rails to continue the panel discussion, just to see what would happen. I'm seeing one nod, which is all I need. So what I'd like is, if you've been sitting there in the audience, you're so patient. Some of you, there's a 3-hour time change. What is it, 10 o'clock where you are? Yeah. Some of you have kids and you're probably going to be up anyway, really late with your newborns. Maybe like, if you can show your video and raise a hand, or throw a balloon on the corner of your screen, or just something to indicate you want to ask a question, we can get some of the most pressing questions aired instead of waiting until closer to the end of the hour. And then I have more panel questions. Does anyone want to go first? I have one backup question too from someone who couldn't stick around, and I'm just scrolling up into the notes. I have a question from James, if going once. All right, James really wanted this question. I gave him my email and everything, but he had to go at like 6:30. So I'm just gonna read this out in real time. And then he said, I'd really love to hear best practices on how to engage external parties on more modern, agile-oriented approaches to developing modern capabilities. So he hasn't named anyone in that question. Personally, I think, is that like a BC public service question? Zach, I'm happy to spotlight you if you think that is. I see. Hi.
I will jump in for just a second here, because this is a question that hits so many different facets. Because a lot of times in government, at the end of the day, we're a lot of business people. We're a lot of politically minded or policy people. You see a lot of that in government. And that means that we do not have the developers and the people that are doing that really interesting digital innovation on the day-to-day, like you would see with the vendors present. So inevitably, we don't know what we don't know. And as a result, that ends up creating this cycle of us going to the same well time and time again. It's not necessarily that same well is not giving us water, but is it the cleanest, the best, all of that water? We don't know. And it's important for us to be able to have those conversations with companies like this, to be able to go, we've got a technical problem. We need a technical solution, and we need experts when it comes to technical problem solving to help us know what we don't know, to help us solve for those kinds of problems and those kinds of equations across government. That's the issue that we see kind of from the government side of things, because we know what service we need. We know what business practice we need. And we typically just don't know what is the most modern, best practice, best technical response to solving that.
Thanks for that. All right, I've left questions quite open here. I'm not seeing any super keen people just yet. And one of the, Kevin, did you want me to read it out? I'm gonna read it out. Or yeah, for BC digital marketplace partners, what key advice would you give to other vendors who are skeptical about this new experience? It's a great question, Kevin. I know, adding competition. Please go ahead.
So I think it's good that you're starting with skepticism, because I think it's a process, it's a different process, and it will allow you to think differently, and which could be different if you are used to working in a different way, where you are applying to these big bids or writing big forms. So it is a bit different. It is sort of an acquired taste almost. But I think what it allows you to do is experience something totally different, and something that is so fast that before you know it, the procurement is over. And one way or the other, whether you win or you lose, you will know soon, rather than just waiting months and months and then waiting in anticipation. So I think in order for you to, I guess, prepare or advice that I would give is really understand the journey that Zachary mentioned in that presentation, and go through some of the opportunities that were listed on the marketplace, and see what they needed and what was the process, what were the 4 different phases and how they're marked, and see if you have the right team and resources to put towards it. Because once you go into the process and you get selected, it's very intense, and it captures the imagination of your team, and the team really gets invested in that. So it's good that you're starting from skepticism, but once you do your research, and if you're looking for faster results, then it's great.
I think you also need to bear in mind that you're not going to win everyone. I mean, I think AOT sort of before my time, but I think that they actually entered 8 or something like that, at least 5 or 6 anyway before we actually won one. So it's one of those things where you do invest effort, and you probably invest more effort than you would with the traditional RFP process, although, as I mentioned, it's a different skill set. But you've got a team, pretty much occupied for anywhere, 3-4 weeks. And you have to keep them on ice, because if you win the challenge, that team's going to do the challenge, right? So it is a big commitment, but it's probably no more at the end of the day than having a couple of people who write RFP responses. It's a different skill set, though. You need different kinds of people.
Yeah. I would say, have a go. Like, really, it takes a bit of courage to go ahead with this. And personally, like, when our first Sprint With Us opportunity, we won the procurement concierge, and it was just 2 people. It was myself and a designer. And if we can go in and win one with a small team, it means that the barriers to entry are very accessible for people who haven't done Sprint With Us opportunities before. The ecosystem needs more competition, because that's what makes everyone more excellent, and ultimately helps citizens and residents of BC. That's what that's what creates value for our province. So if you're hesitating, or if you're wondering if you should do it, the answer is yes, you should, and get started. I know there was a question in the chat about whether Sprint With Us when it's going to be launched. It's actually launched right now on the digital marketplace in BC, and I'll paste a link into the chat.
Okay, thanks for that. I have questions, but I'm going to wait because Sadar, I hope that's not too bad. Is Sprint With Us the digital procurement software being rolled out, and when will it be launched? And I guess you just sort of answered that.
Sorry, I didn't mean to jump the gun. I pasted the link in the chat. Yeah.
I'm just a little preoccupied. So say I just moved to Revelstoke, and I'm like, forget this pandemic, I'm moving to Revelstoke. I've got a little sprint team over here, Drew. You seem to be suggesting that even these potentially like smaller teams who aren't in the big city should fear not. Can you just reaffirm that?
Yeah, I think so. Government is more and more open to remote work, and the pandemic has given them, I think, the kick in the butt they needed. And it's a meritocracy. Remember, if your team, no matter how big it is and where you are, if you're able to work to a really good standard and have the right values when you approach the opportunity, like, it's public service at arm's length in a way. I think you should definitely go for it, because a lot of these opportunities get a variety of companies applying. The 4 of us represented here, but also much larger firms. And because of that blind analysis during team questions, you're guaranteed to have an equal spot. There is no preconceived notion about how big, based on the size of your team or where you're located. So I think, yeah. So to answer your question, yes. Sorry for the long-winded response. Yeah.
Steve, I see your video. Do you want to come up as well? Are some of these relevant for your interest in specialties, or are you just showing video for the heck of it? You seem good. Okay. I might have cut you off, Rachel. Go ahead.
No, totally fine. I can speak for Button as well. Oh, Zach, do you want to go?
Oh, I was just going to do a quick little ad and say that it has been launched out in BC since 2018, but we've also worked with other provinces to start supporting out these efforts there as well. We see that the Yukon has launched out their own marketplace with the use of a Code With Us procurement process. We also see that Quebec has currently forked the repo and is currently translating and doing all of that work that they need to do to be able to launch out their own digital marketplace with a Sprint With Us and Code With Us process. We're working with the federal government to work with the Shared Services Canada to be supporting it there, and also working with a few teams there to be able to be working with a project that's hopefully going to be launching fairly soon here called Scale Up, which is going to be serving a lot of these same purposes of working with small and medium-sized companies across the country. So stay tuned, because yes, this is right now, it's more of a BC tool, but we are in talks across the country to be able to support out that open source and open engagement across all the provinces.
Yeah, you emphasized that a bit, and maybe I could just follow up on that, because like Skydra, I'm sure you're awake. I know you're on the East Coast. I'm sure there's a couple other Civic Tech nerds who are still here. So I'm just gonna pretend that I know what they're thinking and ask a question. How do we on the East Coast, us Civic Tech nerds, like follow what is going on, the replication of this model across Canada? Like, whose names should we know? Which departments is it happening in? Like, I can't even picture that right now. How do we keep a pulse on this?
That's a really good question, and for the most part, I can barely keep a pulse on this, and that's when they're all coming to me to talk about it. So, this is one of those things that works with Yukon. They've already kind of rolled out their version of it. I know Quebec isn't going to have theirs out for, I believe it's still another year before they're going to be going live with theirs. So it really is kind of a phased approach that's happening in this space. But I also know that we've seen companies being engaged. Button, I'm not sure which corner Button's in comparatively speaking, but Button, when they first applied with Sprint With Us, they were based out of Ontario. So I don't even know how they found out about us or found out how to get involved in this process, but here we are a few years later. So there is engagements happening all across the country, but it's all just part of that conversation of not only maturing the procurement within that space, but maturing the government to understand all the things that I've been talking about this evening about what does it mean to be agile and do digital development and work in these kinds of environments to engage with vendors like this.
Yeah, and Rachel, I see you off mute. You must have something to say.
Yeah, that's actually what I was going to jump in with is, for people who are skeptics, we are still headquartered in Ontario, technically, but we applied for a Sprint With Us to work on a climate change project. We had a really special team that had a kind of unique mix, I think, of expertise in fuzzy matching, data science, ETL processes, user research. It was an eclectic team for an eclectic problem. And that's what brought our whole leadership team out here to BC to work on that. And so I would say, the procurement processes that are more accessible, it's really important, I think, to find the opportunities that are a great match for your team. And to the point that a few people have brought up from government and Chris talking about how teams collaborate, government doesn't need to be using the most modern technology that came out 5 minutes ago. Government adopts best practices from across the private sector and enterprise. I think Jamie Boyd mentioned in the beginning that, you know, it's unrealistic for government to have all this subject matter expertise in-house, but it does take a community and a village to form those best practices that we use across government. And Sprint with Us is a really good way, I think, to bring new voices in to that discussion and talk about how we're going to use technology moving forward. And the fact that the projects are, I know 2 million seems big, but still relatively small in global government procurement terms, means that we can have these conversations repeatedly, iteratively across all of these projects and keep working together to make sure that, you know, we're moving forward together.
Thanks for that context. I hear million, I think big, so thank you for that. Skydge, I see this comment. Did you want to speak to that, or do you want me to just read it out, or?
Yeah, I mean, I'll just simply say, like, yeah, I'm coming to this conversation from Ontario and as a public servant and also as a civic tech organizer, and I just feel like a lot of the things you're sharing, especially on the public service side, they resonate with a lot of the challenges that Ontario faces. And sometimes it feels like we have these small groups and kind of like chat and connect, but it would be nice if we somehow found a way to, like, I don't know, just like more formally, annually, quarterly, like really check in and have it be on the sort of, I guess, like more director, manager, employee level, the folks actually doing the programming for something like digital, like DC digital marketplace, or I don't know, just something that kind of brings it more to the team level. And these conversations really do help. And so I'm just, yeah, it just makes me think of that. And it's really great to have this conversation out in the open.
Okay, I don't think there's other questions in the queue, so I want to try this panel again, unless someone cuts me off. I'm going to rephrase one of the questions I gave you, but do me a favor, dream with me, okay? A year from now, 2 years from now, the digital marketplace is even better. I know it's hard to imagine, but let's just try, okay? What does it do? What does it have? How is your experience even better than what it is now? We're all friends here. Take a chance. Think about it for 10 seconds. And anyone who's not a partner currently, if you're a vendor and you're like, ooh, I'd like this. I mean, speak now. Zach, I guess you could criticize yourself too, but I see Drew. Amazing.
Yeah.
Criticize me.
Do you want to go, Zach, or?
No, please take it away.
Some of the discussions I think that have been had about the digital marketplace, one of the topics that have come up is introducing additional programs. And I know I've spoken to Zach about this, but right now it serves the developer community very well. And it would be great to see a program address designers. Because I think, you know, design thinking is something government could probably use more of, especially in planning for long-term projects. One of the nice things about Sprint with Us is that there is a price limit to how much an opportunity can be, $2 million, which in my mind is a really good thing because it forces the government to have checkpoints. So if you're running a multi-phase opportunity with many Sprint with Us programs through there, it would be great to have an introductory design with us opportunity where their designers joined government and says, hey, we need to think about this product and what the requirements might be. And that could really help the government save money in the long run or increase value. So in a year's time, it may be too ambitious, but I would love to see a new program on the digital marketplace.
I love that idea. So so you're going to the beginning, so the design with us, and I think it's absolutely a fantastic idea. And I think I'm going to the end because after the sprint with us, there should actually be a follow through with us, because I think that's if I have one criticism of the system, it's that you do your sprint with us and then it's and then the money's gone, and then it's like, well, you know, but there's all this extra stuff that you need to do, and then there's product to support and stuff. So I think that there needs to be both a precursor, you're right, and a postcursor or whatever it is, a follow-on from the sprint with us process.
Sustainment with us.
That's a great idea. I think that's a really great idea. It is something, I think it's hard for government to build ongoing relationships with Sprint with us, and it's because it's such a level playing field. You know, every opportunity has to be open to the market, But if a vendor does, I think, an excellent job, there isn't necessarily the policy to make it easy to continue that relationship or have a program like Sustain with us to keep it going.
Yep.
I think that we'd love to see some more volume through the digital marketplace, to the extent that a few vendors have alluded that it takes some retooling to bid on those projects. You know, when there aren't that many opportunities that are coming through the vehicle, every time we propose a different team, they're starting fresh, saying what's a code challenge and what's a team scenario. And that actually does take a significant amount of resources on our side, and means that right now this process costs at least 2x for us what a normal procurement process can cost for a similar deal size. And so I think would love to see that, and would love to keep working with the government on lowering the barrier to entry being a forcing function for diversity in tech and diversity in tech workforce as well, because I think there's some real opportunities to take people who are interested in retraining or who don't have that track record of work with government, right? Which is one of the really big benefits of Sprint with us being a more level playing field. Is as a business, you're not off the bat trying to demonstrate 5 or 10 or 30 years of experience in government, and using that as a conversation starter for how we get a more diverse community, creating tools for people in tech. Because if any audience is attuned to that, it's government, because citizens are everyone.
Zach, do you want to turn this into like a quasi user interview and sort of respond and get a little curious here? I have a feeling this is getting pretty interesting.
So right off the bat, like there's a few things that, you know, I've been in this now for just shy of 4 years, and without a doubt, everything that has been that's been voiced by the vendors here has run through my head at least once. You know, with what Drew commented on, it makes me think about what I had in my slide deck about that business case development, and then the Treasury Board submission and all of that stuff. It's like, well, we're only talking right now about the procurement space. Well, the procurement space is based off of a Treasury Board submission. It's based off a business case submission, which may already be flawed with bad decisions. So how can we get to, and I'm just gesturing in general to the people that are surrounding me on the screen here, but how can we get to the smart people in our community to go, I need to do a business case, and I don't even know where to start yet, because I already know that I've got a problem and I need a technical solution, and it's already, I already don't know where to start. So like that's a great opportunity for us to be able to capture there. I know that initially, and I know I'll point the finger at Peter and Paul, but I have to point the finger a little bit at myself as well. The reason why we didn't do a maintenance part of this is because we were trying to use it as a cattle prod to government, to be like, hey, get your own team and take care of your things. But we also need to be aware that that's a conversation that takes time. We need to change a mentality that's within public sector of, no, we get vendors to do that stuff. You know, yes, it's great to have your teams all involved in building these great tools, but do we need to necessarily have your teams to just keep the lights on? Probably not. We should be actively involved in this too, not only because we should have people with these kinds of skill sets in government so that we can understand our procurements and understand our business cases and understand all of this sort of thing, but so that we can be better informed partners when we come to the conversation, when we come to the table to meet with you. The last thing we should do is put nothing but business people on one side of the table and nothing but tech people on the other. So I love hearing what they've put forward so far, because I know that this is a big challenge. A couple of things, like you said, me dreaming 2 years from now, I would love to automate the code challenge in some way. I think that would be an amazing way for us to be able to streamline that process, because I know that it increases the costs on the vendors. I know that that's a challenge in that space, and I have brainstormed and I've looked at other options, and yes, there's a fair few options that I've considered on ways that we could potentially do this. I know that one thing, and it's a little bit expensive, and the team scenario, I never want to change it ever. And I'm pretty sure all the vendors here know why, because it's such an incredible opportunity for us to see your team in action. But I also look at that and go, how can we make that better? How can we create a structure and a collaborativeness that makes it so that it's as little impact on the vendors as possible? It does create challenges for all of them, and I know that it does. I often hear from vendors that struggle with the team questions component and go, I really don't like the word cap. Well, on the other side of the equation, I really don't like receiving 100-page binders. So what can we do to try and streamline those processes? Is Sprint with Us perfect today? Absolutely not. And this is going to be something that's going to take engagement from both sides of the conversation.
Pause for effect. Any responses?
Dramatic impact.
Can we go any deeper on this topic before we shift gears a little bit? James, I see a hand, James. It's all you.
Oh no, it's all up to me to save the world. Hi everybody, James Delorme, and love discussion in and out, unfortunately, but this is Zachary just went down that road where I was going to go, and that's user experience and unifying systems so that it works for everybody. The great equality that can take place with everybody at the table. So I come from an Indigenous background, First Nations, and I work on the Small Business Roundtable with the province, and also have my own company and work in lots of digital spaces. And all this initiative comes down to one thing, and it's relationships, and that those protocols are really important because those relationships are going to be the ones that actually drive this foundation to be very successful in all aspects of not only government, public sector, but in communities, where it's really important that, people are being heard and have the ability to work in these spaces. So I come from that grassroots kind of perspective, Indigenous, of course, but also from the perspective of working with government. This is a huge initiative that's going to bring some life into not only the ugly word of reconciliation, but also just with relationship building and getting back to those values. So thank you for this conversation. And I just wanted just a commentary to say this is a wonderful thing. Thank you.
Okay, I see no hands. Oh, except James. Thank you for that, James. Two things I want to call out. PatCon, you got a lot in the chat. I don't know if you actually want to verbalize any of that. But if you don't, Brandon Chu has a question in chat that, Brandon, unless you want to articulate that, I'm happy to just call it out. So I'm gonna.
Yeah, I can. I just didn't want to interrupt when we had someone else speaking.
Perfect.
So my interest in this mostly comes from federal level. So I'm in Ottawa, and I would desperately like to see fewer of our large scale and even medium scale procurement projects going to companies like IBM and Oracle that really are just subcontracting that work out to developing nations anyway. I'd like to see that money being reinvested into Canadian businesses and putting back into the economy. This seems like a wonderful way of being able to do that. But there's obviously a ton of kind of red tape, we'll call it, at the federal level to get this adopted. And I'm curious if what kind of we see those largest, most obvious barriers being, and if, the big if those can actually be surmounted without, large scale changes.
Great question. Hive Mind, what say you?
I can answer this, sorry, from a US perspective, but Zach, if you have a Canadian perspective.
Take it away. I interrupted you last time, so it's all you this time.
No, and I apologize because I think that I have a minor Wi-Fi delay, and so I feel frozen, I think, when I'm not. In the US, it has been multiple things that have prevented that. It's the long budget process you go through for approval, where by the time it's approved, you have such a rigorous set of requirements that practically the only people who can meet them for larger projects are very large firms. It has to do with the way that the federal government in the US outsources risk. So the fact that it's either you need to pay a bond up front or you need very large amounts of liability insurance or certifications or things that actually probably don't impact the quality of your code or your delivery or your design, but are very focused on the way the government views risk mitigation. And in the US, where I've started to see that break down a bit is projects that initiate either through political channels, so through OSTP, the White House, Office of Science and Technology Policy, or through municipalities and Bubble Up, and through programs that promote things like open data. The more open data sets government has that smaller vendors can play with and work on and contribute to, the more that they are then able to turn around and play in the arena of bidding on some of those projects that work with those data sets, because they built the track record, and government work is often about giving people opportunities to build that track record.
Yeah, great response. And when I say hive mind, I do mean literally everybody in this room right now. So if you can add to this question, like, please, raise a hand before we move to PassCon.
So one of the big things to consider in this space, and this is a conversation I've had with so many governments now, is they look at what we've done here and they just go like, oh, that takes so long and all the money. And it's like, for us to build the first iteration of both Code with Us and Sprint with Us, get it out to market and run it for a year was $450,000. That we just in like the first 4 procurements that we ran alone, we saved that amount of money in just legal and procurement processes and on all of those things if we had done it through the normal process. So this was not this massive $30 million extravagant program and lawyers and all. No, $450,000, which, when I throw out a number like that so flippantly, that's a lot of money. That's a healthy down payment on a house. But for a program like this and the amount of opportunity and savings that it has been able to generate across all of the business areas in government that have used it, I know full well that it has paid for itself multiple times over now across the 20 or so Sprint with Us's and the 100+ Code with Us's that it has brought to market. Also, I saw in the context here of like, what does it take to like bring something like this to like the federal level? And so this is something that I'm actively engaged with them to discuss about what we can do to make this not just a BC solution. Because as I said when I first started out this presentation, or my presentation, was that idea of government's purpose is to serve its citizens. So there's no reason why this has to be the BC government's digital marketplace. Yes, maybe this is where it started, but we're seeing provinces starting to pick it up, and we want to be able to engage with them and see how they evolve it as well, so that we can start to have this open share and dialogue. And who knows, maybe a year from now Quebec launches theirs, and a year from then they launch Help with Us, Work with Us, Be Nice to Us, whatever it is, and then we can take that from them and generate that model out here. That's really where I think the value is, because at 450,000 for a program like this and the savings it can generate, this can easily grow, just go like wildfire.
Really catchy terms. I feel like in your next life you should be in marketing. That was really good. So Pat,
if I could, sorry, I was just hoping if I could add a quick note. Pragmatically speaking, we rethemed the digital marketplace and updated it to work with Yukon's policies in a period of 3 weeks from existing BC code to deployment. So the actual operational cost of being able to do this. If the feds want to run their own digital marketplace in isolation, it's not an operational thing that would block it. It's really policy and internal process, which is outside of the control of the vendor community.
And then I'll just stretch for people who might be here from the US. I'm sure at the beginning of the event, at least they were here and they were curious about Canadian procurement for some reason. Would that lend itself to the US, those same like obstacles in, I don't know, trying to port or fork or, you know what I mean?
Largely speaking, yes. The US has a much larger spend on procurement than Canada does in general. And they are also concerned with fairness and transparency. So there's definitely room for any program that is saying we're going to be more transparent and more accessible. Largely speaking, in the US, there are, for better or worse, more options, which often means that there are different ways around different problems. Where in Canada, we have fewer procurement systems, less spend. And I think, and strangely, I think some people might be surprised to hear this, sometimes less transparency, at least until recent administrations in the US. The US is very strong open government, open data policies, and Canada has done some great work in the last 5 to 10 years to implement some of that. But it's a little bit of a different landscape. From my background in the US, you know, the working around defense ends up being the 800-pound gorilla in the room. And so there's always room for better civic tech policy, and there's always room for better civic tech policy that's not driven by defense spend.
Mm-hmm. Thanks for that. Okay, Pat, I'm going to try to go to you next. I'm sure your arm's getting tired. And Sam, I do see your question in chat. So we've got at least 2 questions and 22 minutes left. I think we're in good shape. Go ahead, Pat.
Cool, thanks. I have to admit, I had another Civic Tech meetup, and so I'm late getting here, but I think no one has asked this yet because it's a little weirdo and on the side. Disclaimer, I'm a member of a democratic worker cooperative digital services company, so I have a self-interest in this question. But I'm just curious, this is a hive mind ask. Is anyone aware of like procurement policies at any level, whether municipal to federal to provincial, that kind of favors or gives any sort of perk to kind of democratically run worker cooperative institutions? And I guess you know, not that I have to sell anyone here on it, but it's like, you know, they're at their core, they're both democratic institutions. And I feel like if governments are creatures, they should have mirror neurons that are firing when they look at these things and kind of trying to favor. And so I'm just curious whether anyone knows if that's happening outside Spain and, you know, those other bastions. Or if they have any thoughts on like that.
From the procurement lens, there is not a lot of structure that goes around in that space, in particular because predominantly in a public sector level, our obligations are towards our trade obligations and any trade agreements that we've signed across Europe and the US and South America and so on and so forth, which ends up changing a lot of the dynamics on what is how we can go out to market, what we can do when we're engaging with our vendors. It really structures that conversation. It definitely, and not specifically limiting to what you brought forward here, but it limits in a lot of ways how we're allowed to engage with our citizens, how we're allowed to engage with our vendors, and creates a lot of structure around how those conversations can be held. There is inevitably a lot of adaptation and adoption that needs to happen in this space. We're seeing those different changes happening all across the world. Yes, like for example, like you said, like Spain, for example, is doing work in that space, and inevitably we're seeing different changes happening all across the world when it comes to different procurement practices and different procurement policies. I know for one thing in particular, like we're working right now on unsolicited proposals as a work effort on trying to understand what does it mean when a vendor comes forward and goes, hey, I've got a solution that doesn't exist anywhere else in the world, and it would be valuable for government. You need to look at this. Well, right now, according to procurement structure, we have to say, thanks, but no thanks. We need to go out to market for this. And if we do that, we might accidentally spill the beans about your secret recipe. So there's challenges in this space because we need to be able to make sure that we are working with you, you're working with us, and that we're meeting all of those obligations that we have agreed to with trade organizations around the world. Not to say that we don't want to be doing work like that, but it definitely creates some complexities when it comes to being able to get those wheels turning.
Are you content, Pat Con? Are you content with that answer? Can anyone add to that? Going once. All right. Sam, did you want to ask the question in chat?
I think it was going back to the question on the federal side, where they came up with Innovate Solutions Canada with the intent to fast track procurement. So I was just curious I think that was a question for Brandon. I don't know if he's here still or not, if he's aware of how those things have gone. And to his question, I think we are working with the federal government of Canada. The biggest challenge, or one of the biggest challenges, is just to get in the door. We are having to get security clearance. And for now, just me and my business partner, we got the security clearance, and it took us close to 2 months to get it done. And for that, we had to make multiple trips to RCMP, get our fingerprints done, and just a whole lot of paperwork. So yeah, that's where the question was coming from.
Brandon says, do you want to respond, Brandon?
I've loosely worked with people from that group. I think they're making progress. I don't think they're making progress as quickly as they want to, which of course makes sense. They're working with the federal government. They'll be long dead before they see the change they're looking for. So it's really hard to say. Loosely on my own, I've been looking at kind of cataloging not necessarily what the problems are. I think we're all very clear on what the problems are with invoking something like this at federal. What I'm more concerned with are solutions, because we talk a lot about what the problems are. I find it much more rare where anyone has solutions to propose, even bad ones.
Wow. All right, so I'm not seeing other questions, and I'm wondering for those introverts who haven't asked a question yet, whose video might not even be on. No pressure, but like, did you get what you came for? Do you have any sort of question? Do you want to like hint at a question? And then while you're thinking about that, let's not forget that the vendor partners that are here tonight, you might have questions of the crowd here. And the good news is there's time for that. So do you also optionally have any questions given the assortment of diehard people still here at this event? Thank you, by the way, 29 people still.
Yeah, it will be interesting to see if you run the poll right now, who are the people who are the resilient ones who are still remaining here? Are we looking at like vendors? Are we looking at people who are looking for jobs, or just curious minds? Not asking.
Good idea.
Uh-huh.
There you go. Engineer, I like those. Software developer, engineer.
I love Zoom. Like it's not hop in, but it's pretty good, you know. Anyway.
Nice. I think it's 10 a.m. in engineering time. So
just leave this up for a sec for people who might have been away from their computer, but there's a poll. If you want to vote, we're curious why you're still here, and then we'll get back into it.
There's got to be a better way to say that.
Probably.
I was about to leave, but now I feel bad.
I'm curious to know if any vendors, want to actually use the digital marketplace now, based on the discussion here. If there are any vendors remaining, to give a few.
5 of them.
All right.
I'm a government who wants to use it.
Thanks, Purdy. So did we change, I mean, I'll still ask one more question, but I am curious. Did we change the hearts and minds of anyone in the room tonight who was coming, you know, kind of kicking the tires, like, am I really going to go to this procurement event? Yes. And you're here. Like, do you want to comment on sort of what you've learned so far? Leo, I see your video on. Hello, good sir.
Hi, good evening. And I am regretting missing all the presentations. So I work for the city of Vancouver, and I lead the technology portfolio there. And I got caught up in work. And so I feel a bit out of touch and uninformed to make comment, other than to say that there is a very tangible action at the city of Vancouver around social and sustainable procurement. So I've just been engaged with our procurement folks at the start of this year to reinvigorate that process. So I need to go and figure out from them where they're at with things, but you know, no promises, but I'm inspired by what I've heard. I think I've been on for the last hour and a bit.
Yeah.
I did miss a lot of the presentations, and quick shout out to Jenna McNeil. My daughter Erin says hello.
Amazing. Jenna, would you like to respond to that?
I think you're the Jenna McNeil that played field hockey with my daughter at UBC.
Hi, Erin.
She's not here, but I did. This was my verbal hi to her buddy.
Okay, Leo, I have a question about the FOMO you're feeling right now as a City of Vancouver stakeholder. Can you just tell us a little bit more about why the hard FOMO right now? What is it as a City of Vancouver stakeholder? I'm sorry I missed so much of this event because. Help me fill in the blank there.
Well, I didn't get to see any of the presentations, so I don't feel like I have the context.
And had you seen them, what do you think you would have like pulled out of it that would have been so valuable?
So I think there's an alignment piece around what the province is doing and what we could do as local government, and we're so swamped right now with still COVID response that my days are long, and I don't get to do this kind of cool stuff. So I've been responding to emails and a bunch of other things, but I've been listening, and it makes me think that there's an advocacy part that can happen from my role, and I just want to be better informed before I make any commitments publicly.
Fair.
But thank you all for your passion, because you're getting me excited.
Hey, that's why this event's here. Rachel, I see you're off mute.
Oh, I think that may have been a fluke. I mean, I wanted to thank everyone who's here and part of this dialogue. I think, you know, innovating on procurement is hard, because at the heart of procurement, it is supposed to be open, transparent, have disclosed scoring criteria, be clear enough that you can propose the right team to the problem, and, you know, sprint with us like any procurement vehicle. It works really well sometimes. I think, you know, there's other times, and on both sides, right, where, and I think Drew brought it up, sometimes it's hard for government people who you want to work with to figure out how they can procure you. And sometimes on the government side, they know who they want to procure and want to figure it out. So this kind of dialogue where we make sure that we all have access to the right channels, but we also make sure that we're holding up the integrity of the process together, creating more opportunities for smaller businesses that aren't just the incumbents, that are the staid companies that have been there for a very long time is really important and helps all of us. So really important conversation.
Yeah, I think I'd second that. I think it alludes a little bit to what I was saying earlier, that there needs to be a follow on. So if you find a good vendor and you have a good sprint with us experience, there should be a mechanism to keep that going longer, to you know, for the mutual benefit of both parties. I think that, you know, every time it's restricted to whatever it is, the 6 months or 3 months, whatever it might be, the chopping and the changing tends to lose something in the lack of continuity. That's why I'd like to see the the ability to follow it on.
No, and this is an interesting challenge to be able to resolve, especially speaking to like the fair and open and transparent requirements of procurement, and how we can be engaging with the vendors and understanding how we can start to bridge that relationship. One of the things that's really key here is that we've had 20 sprint with us that have gone out the door and been able to get vendors to be able to support out in those operational capacities. But for every one that we've had that's been successful, I've had at least one, if not two, ministry clients come to me, and I've had to say no. And that's typically because they're coming to it from the wrong spirit, the wrong intent. They just want the fast procurement, but they don't want to be changing the way they operate. They don't want that to dedicate the product owner or work in that digital environment. They just want to give somebody else, here's the problem, here's the hot potato, you solve it now. And so it's important that we need to mature as an organization on government, and not only when it comes to digital, but also procurement and agile and so many of those different practices that we have typically always just made you do instead of us. You be the digital people, you be the agile people. We just get the rewards of whatever it is that you finish building. And it's more important that we become actually committed partners within that conversation. I know for Leo, it's the important thing is that we need to be building processes and practices here that raises the water level for all public sector, so that all the boats are floating. And that's what we need to be doing across not just BC, yes, this is a BC government product that predominantly has worked for Victoria and Vancouver, but how do we get it to be Prince George and Kamloops and Smithers, call it my hometown there for a moment, but how can we get it so that we're reaching out to those other areas within BC? And then how do we take it across the country so that they're raising the water levels everywhere?
Smithers, I've heard there's great powder there. Drew, you've got 2 questions in chat. So if someone can't add on Zach, I want you to be able to ask that. And then I kind of have a blue sky question with about 7 minutes left here before the hour. So Drew, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I just wanted to, I guess, put these questions out there to follow on from what Zach was saying. Does the BC government want to be a leader in procurement in Canada? Like, is the investment being made at the ADM, the DM level to say, yes, this is something that has made tangible improvements to the tech community in BC? And is it in front of mind, or is it just going to be a small project that has these major milestones and creates incredible value, but never gets the backing it needs to reach its potential?
It's a loaded question.
Yeah, sorry, tough question.
Yeah. Oh, did my chair just get really hot? Whew.
It's like 5 to 8. It's the perfect time to ask this question.
You can pass, but
No, I'm not going to shy away. So things like this are always going to happen in waves. I'm not going to be able to say that yes, there's the full commitment to this. Obviously, nobody had any idea what this past year was going to throw at us, and the complete change in direction towards the COVID response has definitely reprioritized a lot of things across government. I know, being in the procurement shop, I'm seeing a lot of our ministry clients coming to us going, hey, here's that 2020 project that we really wanted to do that got backburnered. So, inevitably, we are going to see a lot of things start to get revitalized, and a lot of other projects getting kind of that fire lit under them. And I'm already seeing efforts when it comes to the digital marketplace, as was indicated just with Steve Chapman. He's joined the team as of a month ago. That's the greatest news ever, because I have been wearing that hat for far too long, and getting to have somebody else to shoulder that burden with me. Burden's a bad choice of words perhaps, but getting to have somebody else to work alongside is incredible for this. The work that we're doing with the procurement concierge and being able to breathe life into that project and to be able to kind of revitalize the unsolicited proposals work that we're striving towards. All of these different facets are things that I don't want to say that, you know, they're going to solve procurement for government, but you know, we do need to recognize that none of these things are going to be flip of the switch kind of problems. They take dedication. They take a strong team who are going to work through the legal, the procurement, the technical challenges that are out there, so that we can start to bring out some of these ideas to market. And you know, inevitably there's so many different facets of these sorts of things, digital marketplace aside, happening on a global scale. We look at things that are happening in the UK and in Norway, and I know that a lot of the times that we hear great things coming out of places like Estonia, where they're really changing the conversation about how we do things like digital identity or machine learning, or engaging with cloud services to be able to support out digital modernization of government. And you know, it inevitably, this is a massive boulder to start rolling, but we're already starting to see that it is gaining momentum. It's the projects that your teams and others have been involved in that help to propel us forward, and to help to well, go back to my last metaphor, raise the water level across BC, raise that knowledge across the ministries and the business partners that are trying to understand, what does it mean to actually be technology first, and then your specific service second. How do we prioritize that functionality, those tech conversations, so that we can be a modern government?
I think one thing I'd love to say is, just for the attendees, is that, you know, Zach and Steve have done a phenomenal job behind the scenes, you know, for a long time. Like, it takes endurance to have the digital marketplace be what it is. And I guess my perspective on it is I would love to see the same energy from senior leadership in BC, because I think we do have a unique opportunity as a province to lead Canada in modernizing procurement. So just part of it is to also acknowledge, I think, the work that Zach and Steve have done, because it is a Herculean effort that's manifested itself.
Wow. Okay. I don't know if maybe we could end on that. I don't know if I should ask a question, but I'm going to do it anyway, because we're definitely not going to be doing this again next week. So someone's at the virtual water cooler tomorrow, and they say, wow, you know, there was like a 3-hour event last night, all about procurement and marketplaces, and it was epic, but I can't believe they didn't talk about X. What was it that they brought up?
I'll take this. I've got it. So going back to one of the comments that was made probably about an hour and a half, 2 hours ago now, was the idea of what is the good, the bad, and the ugly. And I predominantly focused a lot on the good and maybe a little bit on the bad. But I'm going to kind of give you a peek behind the curtain and talk a little bit about one of the ugly things that has been definitely a key struggle with the work that we've done here. When we first were kicked off this work, Steve and I and a few others, we had a small team, and we were working through all of these problems. And you know, May came around, and we launched. I think it was May 14th, 2018. We launched right at the tech summit that was happening there, and everything was exciting. Everything was great. We were on top of the world. And about 2 months later, everyone else on the team has found a new job, and I'm the only man left standing. And it's not so much that was a key problem for the program, but what that did is it really quickly showed the weaknesses in the system. And so I've been talking with a lot of the other governments about, it's like, yes, this is an exciting tool. And yes, this is an exciting opportunity, but it takes that commitment from the executive. It takes that commitment from leadership. When, and I'm going to pick on Drew here, when a certain company steals your developer, all of a sudden you find yourself in a bit of trouble because you go, I've got an app, I've got a service that I need to be supporting out across the province, and now I don't have a developer. Great, that's just the way this needs to go. And so the reason why I touch on this is because this is the challenge that happens in these spaces, is that for tools like this, it's exciting, it's high energy, it can have serious impact, but it needs a serious commitment too. It needs leadership that says, I am dedicating a team to this, I'm dedicating these resources, and if somebody leaves here, we are replacing that person right away, and we're going to keep this thing 100% in the spotlight and focus on it. Because when everybody left and all of a sudden I was the only one left holding the bag, that's when I really realized, oh no, like there are deficiencies in this system. There are challenges when it comes to, well, how do I operate a code challenge? My technical chops, I used to code in Visual Basic and HTML back in the 90s. Turns out that's not what modern digital development's about. So my Hello World webpage is probably the finest piece of coding that I can do these days. I can't run a code challenge. I can't be meeting those needs that are required in this space. And that inevitably means that I either end up failing BC government ministry clients, or I end up failing the vendor clients. So I had to go around and start begging and pleading and borrowing and stealing resources wherever I could to be able to support out the program. And, so inevitably, it's important that we see these commitments, that there is these conversations happening across the board. Just to have code with us, just to have Sprint with us, that's easy. But keeping code with us and Sprint with us, maintaining code with us and Sprint with us, and growing code with us and Sprint with us needs more than just, a procurement team. It needs, people that are going to go work with lawyers, and people that are going to bring that new insight, and people that are going to work in a development environment, and people that are going to try and challenge the standard procurement processes that are across public sector. I can't stress this enough. It's not just a flip the switch and your problems start getting solved. It takes an active commitment across your leadership, across public sector, across the vendors.
Okay, that's probably going to be the last word. Thank you for that. My goodness. Well, we said we didn't on time. We didn't. I'll give you a mini apology for that. And I want to give a warm thank you again to all the speakers for spending the time on a relatively sunny day on the West Coast to talk about procurement in the marketplace, and for super thoughtful, largely unscripted answers. My goodness, this event took quite a turn compared to the agenda, and I'm pleasantly delighted. So thank you so much. Yeah, if you like these events, we don't have a plan for what the next Civic Tech event is going to be. If you want to help organize, or you don't want to help organize, but you have a really good idea for what the next event should be, we could probably do the work in a month. But send us your ideas or send us your questions. It won't be that hard to find us. So we really love the engagement during and after the event. Oh, thank you, Kevin. Did you want to say a bit, or just... No, you're good. Yeah, so here's the contact info for us. I guess we could just leave that up for a moment. Beyond that, I just want to thank everybody again. And this is a free out for anyone who only expected to be here this long. What I'll do is I'm going to leave the room open. And if there's keen people who expected to mingle after the event, that's fine. But no one else is bound here at this point. If you have to go, we won't judge you. I'm going to do a 20-second awkward pause just to see who's still here. Yeah, it's actually not that awkward. All right.
I'm going to go. I was going to type it, but I thought I'll just say it. Thanks, everyone. That was great. Probably meet some of you around the traps. Goodbye.
Take care.
Thanks.
Thank you so much, Chris.
I've actually got to make a move as well and grab some dinner. But thank you again, everyone, for having me, and it's been a pleasure to be a part of this. Some wonderful co-panelists and speakers, and thank you to Gordon, Jenna, Kevin. Amazing job organizing this.
Hey,
right.
real pleasure.
Bye.
Thanks, Drew.
Bye, Drew.
Bye.